Currently in our project we're using quite a few icons, and for icons we're using custom library. And anytime we have to show up some icon, we firstly have to import component from the library and then reference this component in the template. And that means we currently have all those custom imports spread all over our components. But now let's imagine that in the future we're going to decide to replace this library with another one. That means we have to go through all the components we are currently importing custom icon components and modify all those imports. So to avoid doing that, we actually can apply a different approach. So for example, we can create custom base component that will be responsible for rendering all icons in our application. And in this case, when we decide to change icon library, we're gonna have to modify only that one component that we're going to create right now. So as always, I'm going to create base component inside components folder with the name BaseIcon, and in here let's just add basic skeleton for our component with an empty template tag as well as script tag with a keyword setup. And the first thing what I'm basically going to do in here is actually write an import for all icon components currently used in our application. So I'm just going to mention all these components right here and then assign aliases to all these imports just to avoid repeating word icon as a suffix. And now I'm gonna go down here and create new object called icons, and here we're basically going to copy over all those icon names and use these names as key and values for this object. And a bit later it will become clear why I'm creating this object, so for now let's just reference icon aliases as key and values for this object. And here is an interesting part. Now we're gonna start using this object in the template. So this template will render dynamic component, and as an expression for is attribute, we're gonna write the following. We will basically reference particular icon component inside of icons based on prop name. And this prop name, of course, will come from outside. And anytime we're gonna have to render specific icon, we're gonna use this base component with a prop name where we're gonna specify which icon exactly we have to render. And of course, I'm gonna have to declare this prop, so let's use macro define props and declare one prop called name. This property will be required to pass of the type string. And now what we have to do is actually go through all the components where we currently import custom icon components and actually remove all these imports, and instead what we're gonna do is import our new base icon component. And then in that template we're going to use this base icon component with specifying a proper icon name inside the name attribute. In this case, as we can see, we're using trash icon, so we're gonna specify name trash, and then this dynamic component is basically going to extract component based on the key we have specified inside name prop, which corresponds to the trash icon component. And this way, proper icon component will be rendered by our base icon component. So we can easily remove this usage of trash icon, because base icon component will render icon for us. And now let's go to the next component and pretty much repeat the same actions. So inside of base select component, let's import base icon component and remove the import of xmark icon component. And now let's scroll down to the template and use base icon component and specify xmark as a name for this component. Next up is the activity form component. Here we're also going to remove import of custom icon plus icon and instead import base icon component. The same thing we're gonna do inside of template by replacing this usage of icon component on our base icon component with the proper name in this case, which is plus. Next component that we're gonna modify will be the header progress. So let's remove custom icon component and then add import for base icon component. And inside the template, let's replace this icon component on base icon component. And the name in this case will be check circle. In our next component timeline stopwatch, we're actually using 3 icons. So we're gonna remove import of those 3 icons and instead import only one BaseIcon component. And then inside the template, we're gonna go through all these icons and replace these usages on BaseIcon usage. So for the first case, we have to reference arrow path icon name. Then for the second case, the icon will be pose icon. Let's specify proper name inside this name prop. And finally, for the third icon component, we are going to use play icon. And finally, let's switch over to the browser and see for now if all our icon components are properly shown. So as we can see for now, everything looks good. But that's actually not all, because we also have to go inside now item component and replace every icon for every now item component. And as we're gonna see inside the now item component, we are currently using dynamic component to show icons. So based on the property icon, we're choosing which icon component to display. Firstly, let's see where this icon property comes from. And this is coming from the data structure that is currently defined inside constants module. It is this array of now items. And currently in here, every icon property stores reference to the proper icon component. So in our case, this is not going to work anymore. So we have to replace these icon components on simple icon names as strings. So let's just quickly go ahead and do that and replace icon components on basic strings. The first icon is called clock, the second icon is called list bullet, and finally the third icon is called chart bar. So now that we no longer use any custom icon component imports in this module, we can remove this import. And instead, let's go inside now item component, and here we're gonna use our BaseIcon component. So let's add a proper import statement for this component. And then inside the template, we're gonna replace usage of the dynamic component on BaseIcon component like this. And since BaseIcon component requires one prop name, let's pass this prop in here, and as an icon name, we're gonna reference icon property as before, because now these icon properties contain icon names as strings. So as a reminder, inside of this BaseIcon component, we are referencing property name to extract proper icon component from this object. And this way, BaseIcon component is going to show proper icon. And as a result, our project becomes much easier to support, because anytime we decide to change icon library, the only place where we actually have mentions to that custom library is inside BaseIcon component, where we are importing all those custom components from third-party library. So anytime we will replace that library, we will just have to modify the code of BaseIcon component. And now we see that every icon component is actually represented by BaseIcon component. So in other words, BaseIcon component encapsulates all the logic needed to render icon components. Let's continue in the next lesson.